When speaking on an occasion like this one, a good speaker will try to judge the mood of his audience. Some of you, I suspect, are nostalgic. Some of you maybe are giddy, because this is the last gathering of your class, and I'm told it's the largest gathering of your class. I was given two other comparisons. One, the last time you were at Barbara's Brewery right after exams, or when you were on The Entertainer last Wednesday night. This is a great occasion, and you're going to receive one of those medical school parchments that you'll frame and put on your office wall someday to prove to your patients that you're not some quack. However, this day probably doesn't hold a candle to the day you're finally going to get that longer white coat. I thank you for the polite applause as I came to the podium. It wasn't too enthusiastic, it was just polite. Particularly since if media observers and experts are to be believed, few of you have any idea who I am. Because young people don't watch television news. Not at the dinner hour, where I toiled for 4 years, or in the morning, where I sleepwalked for 19 years. During those years at Good Morning America, I got up every morning at 3:20 a.m. So don't complain to me about the hours you're going to have to work in residency. I'm one of the few people in the world outside the medical profession who understands what you're about to go through: permanent jet lag. But some folks do remember what I did, and thus on occasion I get invited to a grand event like this one. And strange things do happen. I retired from Good Morning America in 2006. That was 9 years ago. Just recently, a woman approached me in the Chicago airport, asked me if I were Charlie Gibson, and then said, "I'm so excited because I watch you every morning." Bless her heart. I want to start by telling you how much I admire you. Not because you graduate from one of the great medical schools of the land, but because to get to this point, you had to pass organic chemistry. I had a roommate who came to Princeton as a dedicated and determined pre-med student. And then he took Orgo. And that was the end of that. He graduated as an economics major. All those H's and O's and C's that I saw in his textbook, I don't understand how you can spell anything with those letters. When invited to come here, I was flattered but a bit nonplussed. What does a journalist have to say to young doctors? I mean, I was involved in reporting on medical issues for many years. But for example, after 19 years on Good Morning America, I still don't know if estrogen therapy is a good thing or not. I just know it hasn't worked for me. But in thinking for many months now about coming here, I began to realize that your profession and my profession have a great deal in common. One simple similarity is that everyone has an opinion about what we do and thinks they know how to do it. Everyone seems to have their opinions about the news these days, more and more so with the advocacy journalism that is now in cable, on the internet, and in the blogosphere. And just as many now, with the proliferation of medical information websites, have strong opinions about medical practice and how they should be treated. Which leads to the next similarity. Your patients, my audience, both groups are now active participants in what we do. Patients are no longer passive consumers of the information you may dispense on pharmacology, disease, chronic conditions, or the like. Once diagnosed, they'll be coming into your offices armed with knowledge from WebMD, Mayo.org, Healthline.com, and holding their genome sequence, courtesy of 23andMe. And God help us, they may have also watched Dr. Oz. So you're going to run across a lot of citizen doctors. The knowledge they think they have, you may think is a dangerous thing, but they don't think so. So too today, there is a proliferation of citizen journalists. We're in an age where everyone with a cell phone or a computer thinks of himself as a kind of reporter. And indeed, he or she is. I'm going to give you an example from 2009 when I was first contemplating retirement. There was a shooting that year in the medical unit at Fort Hood, just outside San Antonio. You may remember the story. We knew only the barest of details when I rushed to the anchor desk and went on the air nationwide with a special report. The Pentagon and our reporter there was telling us there were 2 shooters. They were both dead. It was a terrorist attack. They were Muslims, and there had been, they said, a minimum loss of life. After we'd been on the air for 10 minutes or so, a young desk assistant I'd never seen before wandered over to the anchor desk and told my researcher that he'd found some tweets that indicated the Pentagon was wrong. Now, this was 2009. I had never heard the word tweet. I had no idea what it meant. The young man was saying from those tweets that they came from the medical unit inside the medical unit, and they have the ring of authenticity, he said. They indicated that there was just one shooter, that he was alive and in custody. Yes, it was a terrorist attack. Yes, he was a Muslim. But contrary to what the Pentagon was saying, there were a lot of people dead. As anchor, you have to decide right away, do you put that on the air or not? You can put all the qualifiers in the world on that information, but if it's wrong, that's what the audience will remember, that you got it wrong. As evidence, I would refer you to CNN and their reporting on the Boston Marathon bombing 2 years ago, when they were wrong for a couple of hours, and it did not do their reputation any good. With some trepidation, I decided to go with it. And 15 minutes later, the Pentagon changed its story. The kid was right. The tweets were accurate. Citizen reporters inside the medical unit in Texas were putting out good information. After an hour, when I had signed off, we now return you to our regular programming, I stood up and thought to myself, you really do have to retire. There's a whole new paradigm of how news is going to be reported. You don't understand it, but that young man does. I still don't know how he knew where to look for those tweets, but he did. He represents the future, and my time was the past. It is the same in your profession. Information for the consumer, the patient, now comes from all sorts of what I consider to be non-traditional sources. You will not be your patient's only source. I would maintain that none of those who are graduating on this day from journalism schools have any idea how my business will be organized 10 years from now. And I would venture to say those of you who graduate from medical school today are also very uncertain about where your profession is headed. I'm no doctor. I didn't even play one on TV. But I have been fortunate enough to talk to the best in the business. And I would predict that by the time you finish your internship and residency, many of the patients you see will be coming to you with their genome sequence in hand. That sequence is going to better inform the decisions of whom to treat and how to treat, especially as scientists come to better understand how to interpret the information in the genome. You're going to learn so much more about the architecture of disease, its likelihood of progression, and the response of particular cells to existing drugs. And you will have at your disposal new drugs, not yet invented, that will be designed to treat disease with molecular precision. Most of the buzz these days is about developing personalized cancer treatments based on the molecular characteristics of a patient's tumor. But the applicability of genomics-based medicine is so much broader than that. A few months ago, I had occasion to speak to a former provost from Harvard who is now immersed in studying genetic variants in schizophrenia patients. Studying cancer cells is easy, he told me, compared to prying brain cells out from under our thick skulls. But he said they now have tens of thousands of genome sequences of schizophrenia patients. And he told me they have identified 108 genetic variants associated with schizophrenia. And there will be more. He said, and I'm quoting here, "We may have a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle," adding we have to find the other pieces, the other genetic variants, and then figure out how the pieces fit. So while this is going to take years, probably decades, he is predicting that within 5 years, there will be enough actionable biology to get drug companies that have largely abandoned psychiatric research back in the business of finding new drugs to treat and, dare we hope, prevent schizophrenia, perhaps bipolar disorders as well, and maybe, just maybe, a way to attack autism. Those possibilities on the horizon, even with all the journalistic cynicism I can muster, gives me goosebumps. So while my profession is in the midst of profound change, yours is in the midst of a revolution. The use of genomic technologies is going to transform healthcare, meaning that your education does not end today. Indeed, it is just beginning, and woe betide you if you don't keep up. Other parallels in our professions. The public wants both for free and is coming to expect that. The business model for journalism is up for grabs. More and more people eschew the traditional hard copy newspaper. They can get it for free on the internet. Folks watched me on World News with my 7.5 minutes of commercials, a quarter of the time I had on the air, in far fewer numbers than watched anchormen 10 years ago, because they can find the same coverage for free now on the internet. By the same token, they want their medical care for free as well, or almost free. They want employer-provided health insurance with low copays. They may object to Obamacare in principle, but they're signing up like mad for what it gives them. They object to government involvement in their health care, but you'd better not touch their Medicare. The inherent contradiction seems lost on the public, but suffice it to say, in my field and in your field, the public does not want to pay for, or wants to pay the minimum for, what they get. Now I save the last two parallels, the most important parallels, for last. Number one, both you and I have to know how to listen. I don't know it all, and you're not going to know it all. Each story for me, each patient for you, is nuanced and different. We have to know how to hear and understand what people are telling us, how to have an open mind. We have to know how to ask the right follow-up questions, not just what we asked the last patient or the one before that. We must learn not to prejudge, not to pigeonhole, and we should not be looking for the easy explanation in order to get on the air in an hour or to get on to the next patient. And second, you have, and I had, only one thing to sell, and that is trust. I used to tell my producers it takes years to win it, but it can be lost in an instant. And for evidence of that, you need look no further than the NBC anchor desk. Neither of us could be successful if our audience, or in your case, your patients, don't trust. I worry that my profession, with its crazy competition for ratings in broadcasting, readership in newspapers, and eyeballs on the internet, is losing a great deal of that trust as we ignore the things people need to know and tell them instead what survey research shows that they want to know: the sensational, the inconsequential, the pop culture news, and the phrase that I truly hate, news you can use. The degree of trust in you, as medicine makes great leaps forward, is probably growing, and that's good for you. But that increases the responsibility that each and every one of you are going to have to bear. I don't want to overstate the case, but I think both of our professions are sacred trusts. Journalism, at its best, is an essential, absolute essential part of our democracy, to give voice to those who might not otherwise be heard, to hold the powerful to account, to expose injustice and wrongdoing, and to examine and illuminate how our society and our government adapts to the modern age. You have the sacred trust of caring for people, forgiving them, and in some cases restoring to them the health they need to be as productive as possible, as contented as possible, as hopeful as possible, and as fully realized human beings as possible. So now you come to the end of these 4 years that I suspect you, at times, thought would never end. You've had your match day. This is, in effect, your dispatch day, as Keck sends you off to begin your careers. So I say, as a guy who wouldn't have had a clue in organic chemistry class, that I am a bit in awe of all of you. I offer you congratulations, and I wish you Godspeed.
Thank you, Charlie, for a fantastic talk that connected your career with the upcoming careers of these young physicians. On behalf of the Keck School of Medicine of the University of Southern California, I'd like to present to you the Dean's Humanitarian Service Award in recognition of your distinguished career in journalism. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will hang this on my wall just to show my family I'm not some quack.
It is my pleasure to announce the faculty